and welcome back to Map the Maze. So, last week we talked about working with third party professionals, finding support with either a counselor, a psychologist, a lawyer, or a financial advisor. And this week I wanted to talk about friends and family. That it is very common that when I speak to people in intake and ask, so how are you managing? Yeah, how are you getting support to help you through this? That people say, oh, friends and family. I'm relying on them to help me through. I guess what I would say is that is great. And the benefit is they love you. They already love you and they care about you. The challenge is they may not be best equipped to help you through. What I mean by that is that because they love you, they are rarely objective. And so often when I hear people saying, oh, I'm making these decisions. I need to achieve this because my family said I need to, or my friend said I can't do less than this, which is lovely that they're talking to you about it. But the problem is they're not living it. So they're not in the room. They're not the ones who are experiencing this. And at the end of the day, they won't be the person who's going to live with the consequences of those arrangements or that negotiation. So I guess I would say friends and family are helpful. And I think for emotional support, absolutely. But unless they're an expert or a specialist, it can be very difficult to use them for professional advice or guidance, because the reality is they may have been divorced themselves. And often I'll hear that from people. They'll say, oh, but my friend got divorced and they said this is what should happen. But we don't know the circumstances of that separation, and that person isn't in the mediation. So I think great to have people who have had previous experience. Definitely listen, take it on board, see if there's something helpful for you. But it doesn't mean you have to follow what they say. And one of the things that my mediation mentor, Robin Huworth, always talks about is the tribes who are behind every party in a conflict. So every person in a conflict has a tribe behind them, and the tribe is made up of different types of people. There are the hawks, there are the doves, and there are the moderates. So you can probably guess what that means. But the hawks are the people who are like, get every cent, tear their throat out, take them for everything, they deserve nothing. They're a terrible person. They're a monster. They're the very negative, very aggressive. They're very much in your corner, which feels great. But they are really the, it's war. And that can be helpful, but it's a particular point of view. The second group, doves, they're the opposite. It's not war. It's a conflict, and you need to just get out of it as soon as possible because peace, harmony is the most important thing. So there's no point in asking for anything or not agreeing to what the other person proposes. Just agree, just get it over with, just move on. And so they will often be counseling the party to give up on things that they've identified as priorities, because they're like, oh, well, it's not that important. You can get by without it. And that's also a challenge, because at the end of the day, you need to try and achieve your priorities. That if you give up on everything and just acquiesce to what the other person has proposed, it may meet your needs, but it may not. And so that's also a challenge. And then the third group, who are the unusual group, and I often don't find parties who have somebody like this in their corner, is a moderate. So somebody who is on your side, who's partial to you, who wants you to be okay, but who also is objective enough to be able to see maybe if the other person has a perspective that is worth at least considering, or has proposed something that at least is within the range that you should consider, or has information that actually might change how you think about what happened. That we're all very confident about what they call in difficult conversations, the what happened conversation. So we know what we know they're to blame. We just need them to understand that. But a moderate will say, well, actually, you know what you know, but you don't actually know what they know. And we know what the impact has been on you, but we don't really know what their intent was. And so they will actually help to moderate. responses in mediation. And so if I find a party has moderates in their tribe that they're talking to me and they're saying, oh, well, my friend, my family member is saying this, then I know that's somebody that will actually try and keep them on an even keel, won't become too extreme in either direction, won't become too aggressive, won't become too passive, but will actually keep that person balanced, will actually try and help them to process what's happening in a more constructive way. So often when I describe those three groups to people, it is very easy for them to say, oh, well, yes, they're the hawks. I don't often have many doves, but those are the doves. And sometimes, luckily, people say, oh, yes, that sibling, that cousin, that friend, they're the moderate. So then I always say, well, obviously, use all of your network to support you, but they sound like a good person to bounce ideas off. That if you're working through the mediation and you're thinking, well, there's this proposal on the table, it kind of does what I want. I've spoken to my lawyer, they're okay. They think it's okay. This is a good person. The moderate of your family and friends is a good person to speak to get a gauge of, is this going to work for me? What do I think? Just to talk it through with somebody, to kind of think out loud with them. The moderate is a good person to choose for that process. So if you've got a moderate, they are worth their weight in gold. One thing I would say is that family and friends are also available potentially to come to the mediation. And it kind of sounds strange that you might want somebody to come, but I've had several clients who have had either a parent, so maybe their mum or dad, has come to the mediation just to support them, or a friend. So somebody who doesn't talk, isn't there to give input, but is just there to be emotional support. And sometimes that kind of means they say nothing during the mediation in the joint session, and then we break into separate rooms and they can now speak. So they'll have a conversation with the party that has brought them. It's very important that if you're thinking, I'd like to bring somebody just so I can feel a little bit looked after during the mediation, I've got somebody there who's on my side, that you speak to the mediator, because the mediator will need to give consent, but also get consent from the other side. The other thing I would say is just be careful that it might be somebody that you think of as very supportive, but if it's somebody that the other person finds triggering or inflammatory, or they blame for your separation, it will be counterproductive. I mean, that generally people will just say, no, I don't want X to come because I kind of blame them for where we are, or they will just make this more difficult. But just think, when you're asking, can I bring X to the mediation? Is X somebody that is at least neutral as far as the other person is concerned? They don't have a strong feeling about them in any particular way. Really important, because even the asking, can I bring, the new boyfriend to support me, can be seen by the other side as kind of bad faith. Like, you don't really want to get this done. You just want to have this as a chance to kind of beat me up. So think carefully about who, if you want to bring somebody who could come and be helpful in the room. So I remember a story from the very first, I think it was the very first mediation that I observed with Robin. And we were sitting in the room, and he was now in his third marriage. This was his second wife, but was the only wife who had, this is a traditional family, this is the only wife who had produced 4 children, and 2 of whom were boys. And during the mediation, the husband said, actually, I would really like it if my mother could come to the mediation to help me to talk about these issues and to make these decisions. And I think we were bracing for the wife to say, no way is the mother-in-law coming to the mediation to have this conversation. Wrong. She could not have been happier. She was like, that's a great idea. Let's get her to come to the next session. She did. And the reason is that actually the former daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law had a great relationship. The daughter-in-law, the ex-wife, made sure that the children went off and had brunch with grandma every weekend. So she was seen as a very positive influence in their lives, and also as supporting the extended family relationship and kind of helping to keep grandma connected, paternal grandma connected to the children. So she was delighted to have her mother-in-law come because she knew that they had a really good relationship. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. We got into the mediation. She explained what she wanted. And within seconds, the mother-in-law was saying, well, why can't we just do that? Let's just do that. Let's agree to that. So it was interesting because you might have thought it would go the other way, but actually it enabled the husband, the former husband, to feel like he had his family support to do it. And it actually led to a very positive, very constructive atmosphere in the room because there was such a strong amount of good feeling between the mother-in-law and the former daughter-in-law. So it actually was kind of a good lesson that things don't always go the way that you think they're going to go. Sometimes you will be surprised by people. And it was definitely a pleasant surprise, which you don't always have in mediation. So it's memorable for me for that reason. But yeah, so think about who you should bring, who would be a good influence, who's going to help you. So one thing I would say is sometimes when I'm working with parties, they may have received a significant amount of support from their families. And it could even be financial support in order to help them to pay their lawyer. There can be this sense of obligation, I think. And sometimes when I'm working with parties and they're considering proposals, they'll say, well, I can't settle for this because my family has helped me to pay for my lawyer and they've contributed this much and they've been maybe supporting me, I've been living with them or they've been paying my housing or living costs. I can't settle for this. I guess what I would say is at the end of the day, this is your life and your mediation. So just as last week I was saying, you're the client, the lawyer can't tell you what to do. It's the same with your family. They love you. Yeah. They want you to be okay. So if they're paying for your lawyer, if they're paying for your living expenses, that's great. And obviously that's something to be grateful for, that they're in a position to do it and that they want to do that. But they are not the decision maker. They should not be the people who are driving how you consider proposals or how you put proposals on the table in mediation, because at the end of the day, this is your life. Now you will have to live those agreements. You will have to live with those arrangements. The only person who really bears the consequences of those mediation agreements are the two parties and their children. So just be careful that you don't feel so obligated. As I had in one case, she felt so obligated by the fact that her family had paid for her lawyers that she really felt like she had to stick to this hypothetical number that she thought she could achieve in court. She might have achieved it, she might not have. But I guess what I would say is there was a lot of pain along the way to get there, which I think could have been avoided if we had found a solution in the mediation. So that's what I would say about family and friends. The other thing I do hear from people a lot is they don't want to talk to me anymore about it, which I guess is understandable. That I think for a lot of people, family and friends are obviously emotionally engaged with you. They love you, they care about you, but they also have their own lives going on and they may be suffering from health issues or they may have stress in their own life or their work life. And they may not have a lot of capacity to also absorb the stress that you're experiencing. So one thing I do see is that sometimes people will start off working with friends and family as their emotional support. And they'll say, no, it's okay. I've got friends and family who are helping me to process this and to work through this. And then over the course of time, people sometimes then say, actually, I think I'm going to work with a counselor now because my friends and family who really love me have kind of reached their capacity in terms of how much they can absorb from what I am having to process and go through. And that it can be really helpful speaking to a professional who can give you that perspective, that context that a family member often cannot. So I think I would say, don't overwork them. Yeah, they're there because they love you, but at the same time, they've got their own strains and their own lives. And you need to, I kind of think, monitor, is this going to be sustainable to get me through this whole process? Or actually, do I maybe need to layer in working with a professional, at least at some level? So yeah, so working with third parties, working with friends and family. And next week, I'm going to talk to you about what can you do yourself without going outside, without talking to other people. What can you do for yourself to give yourself some help to get through your divorce and separation? Okay, so take care, and I'll see you next week.